Synergy loves company.
With activations across our Synergy machine.
We have this coterie of rich franchises, the company now, that people want to engage with.
I came here to try and continue what Walt Disney and his associates set in motion 50 years ago, which is to experiment with every new and innovative kind of entertainment possible.
It's what we hope to do here, to really develop something that, just more than an entertainment enterprise. It's something that contributes many other ways.
Hey, this is Synergy Loves Company, where we explore how Disney connects to everything. I'm Eric Hathorn, and keeping me company today are Courtney and Emily from the Book of the Mouse Club podcast. Courtney and Emily, I'm so excited to have you here.
Thanks for having us. It's so much fun to get to join other podcasters.
Yes. All these Disney podcasts, right?
We call it the Disney podcast universe, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We just, as we visit each other's portals, I guess.
I like that. It's like the multiverse of Disney podcasts here. That's awesome. So, of course, you guys have your show, Book of the Mouse Club. Could you tell us a little bit about what it is? I love the show. But could you tell my listeners a little bit about what you guys do there?
Absolutely. And thank you, as Emily said, for having us on to discuss a perfect topic, which I'm sure we'll get into. But Book of the Mouse Club is a podcast that Emily and I do together. We've been going strong since 2018. Our promise to our listeners to always to have at least one episode a month, sometimes more, because, of course, we have to read what we're going to discuss. It features author interviews, in-depth discussions between the two of us, as well as bringing on different guest readers to continue that podcast extended universe as we discuss books that inspired Disney, like many of which we'll talk about today, or books about the Walt Disney Company. Really, our library shelf continues to grow because there's so many possibilities.
Awesome. And that's precisely why I couldn't help but think of you two for this concept for this show, because I wanted to talk about banned books and challenged books, but mostly we hear about banned books and Disney because Disney has, like you said, made some adaptations of some books that are kind of often banned and then some that have had some kind of challenge trouble along the way. So the first thing I think before we even get into our list of banned books and challenged books, we probably have to talk about what all that means. So, of course, as a librarian, this is one of those things where I'm going to nerd out a little bit. And I know, Emily, you did your due diligence and research, too, so feel free to jump in on it, too. But banned books, of course, would be not necessarily something that is banned across like a whole state or a whole country. It's more we're looking at something that's been banned at one individual library. And the process of something becoming a banned book is usually that it gets challenged by someone who finds it in a library, doesn't really like it that much, finds it in a school, doesn't think kids should have access to it for some reason or another. And they report it officially to who's ever in charge of that collection or wherever those books are. And then if it gets determined that, yes, it should be pulled from shelves, then it'll become a banned book. So it has to be challenged first. And then become banned after that. So a lot of books just get challenged and never get banned. Another thing that happens is books will kind of be challenged, but it won't be a formal challenge. That happens probably more often than a formal challenge to a book that would go into kind of a banning hearing. But yeah.
So I think I'm a government and politics teacher by day. So I'm going to put my politics hat on for a second. I know, like, when I've brought this up with my students, they've asked, well, isn't that an infringement on freedom of speech? And I do want to quote that or mention that this isn't a ban like Congress is banning something. Our governments are not banning this. Schools, it's a weird complex of how rights and stuff like that work in schools, just because you are dealing with masses and having to respect multiple rights. that sometimes some people's rights are respected more than others just for the sake of public safety or for like schools we vote on what our curriculums are or what materials we use. So even though someone would be like, doesn't this infringe upon First Amendment rights? It could be a yes and it could be a no, because that's not really how that works in education when it comes to rights per se. And for most of these books that we looked at, and the American Library Association notes that even if it's banned, most of the time it's banned from like, it can't be part of the English curriculum or it can't be used by a teacher, but it's still in the library if you choose to pursue that yourself. So there's also some levels here of what banning can look like if it's available but not being actively used in a classroom setting, or if it's not available at all. That kind of depends on the outcome of the banning.
Is it most often banned in a classroom setting, or would this be public libraries as well? Like I'm thinking of like the town from Footloose, but now they're banning books in addition to dancing.
I won't lie, I thought about that too.
Yeah. They probably had some banned books in that town's library for sure. But no, so they can be banned from libraries. What would happen in the case of a public library is you'd get a formal challenge request essentially, and then it would go. A lot of public libraries have boards, so there'd be like a hearing with the board to determine if it should be taken off the shelves or if it should maybe be put in a restricted section. That happens sometimes. You kind of think of like
I was
Harry
going to say,
Potter.
get my
I know it's not
invisibility
Disney,
cloak and make
right?
my way there for these great selections.
But yeah, some libraries will have that. Yeah.
As a librarian, have you seen a book challenge in your library?
I haven't had. So it's kind of tricky with that, like formal challenge versus the like just informal challenge. You get a lot of informal, like, hey, I just wanted to let you know I saw this word in this book. Especially from being a school librarian, from a lot of students, they'll bring a book to you that they checked out and they'll be like, look at this word on page 23. And you're just like, oh, wow. Yeah, that's, you don't have to read this book. If it's not for you, I'll take it, and it's okay. You could pick something else. And then, of course, I put it back on the shelf. Someone else checks it out and they have no problem with it. Or they come and show me the word on page 23 and we do the same thing over again. And it's just kind of like, I get more of that. I haven't had like a formal something from like a parent or someone who was so upset about something that they wanted to take it off the shelf. And even in our classroom libraries, because that would kind of come to me too, we haven't had anything like that. So it is kind of a rare occurrence. It doesn't happen all that often in the day-to-day, but it is happening more and more in different places and throughout our country.
Looking at the American Library Association's website, they said the three main categories that they see books cited or challenged for is first, if the material is considered to be sexually explicit; second, if the material contains offensive language; or third, the material was unsuited to any age group. So those are pretty vague, and I'm sure the books we're going to talk about,
definitely,
all of those things fall into those categories. But just to give an idea of what do people challenge about. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, no, for sure. So that was an awesome kind of overview that we had there of banning and challenging, and that'll set us up perfectly to talk about these. So the order I chose to put these in, because we could have gone any which way, is I went by publication order of the book that was challenged. So the Disney connections are going to be a little out of chronological order, but our books will be in order. So we'll go that way. So the first one I wanted to talk about is kind of a double whammy twofer. One of them has been challenged more than the other, but they kind of come as a pair. And that's The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. So these ones were almost universally, consistently banned from when they were published to today. So originally, some of the reasons they were banned were some people just said that they were trash literature and they shouldn't be on shelves and shouldn't be accessible to people. Some people had problems with kind of Mark Twain's abolitionist kind of message in the stories. But then, of course, we've kind of done a 180, and a lot of the reasons that these two get banned today are for racial slurs. So it was kind of one of those at the time when it was published, it was seen as a little maybe too progressive. And now when we look at it, we're like, wow, these didn't age well. They're a product of their time in kind of a way like that. So that's kind of, these ones always tend to be on the list, especially The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. When we talk about Mark Twain, there's a lot that we connect to Disney, specifically with these books. We've got some movies in the early 90s. It took Disney a while to make these into movies, almost 100 years after they were published, or more than, I should say. So we've got The Adventures of Huck Finn with Elijah Wood, and then we've got Tom and Huck with JTT,
yes.
Jonathan Taylor Thomas, who I'll highlight there. And then, of course, in the parks, we've got the Tom Sawyer Island in Disneyland, Walt Disney World, and Tokyo Disneyland has a version too. So I just kind of want to know your experiences with Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer in the Disney sense.
Sure. I think for me, in the literary sense, I read both for school, and so that absolutely would enhance my experience from the Disney front. Tom Sawyer we read in 6th grade. Now, I had been visiting the Disney parks, specifically Walt Disney World in Florida, for many years before that, but I remember after reading Tom Sawyer that year, I was really excited to go to Tom Sawyer Island that summer because I had a frame of reference for those characters. Like, okay, it says like Tom, Hart, Becky painted on the fence. I'm like, oh, well, now I know what this whole fence painting is about and who these characters are. I did not realize there was the Elijah Wood movie. Definitely saw the JTT one, but now I'm going to have to put the Elijah Wood film on my list.
Same with me on the movie front. I've seen the JTT, obviously, but I don't think I remember the Elijah Wood one either. All I really know him for is Lord of the Rings and Happy Feet. Right. So I will also revisit this one, but kind of the same. And I went through a classics phase. I never read these in school. And I don't know if that's because they were maybe questioned or banned, or if that's because we just took another route with the number of books, because most English classes go by themes. You're going to read books that fit themes, and you've got so many books that can fit those. But we've discussed on Book of the Mouse and with Courtney, in college, I kind of went through a classics phase where I was like, I'm only going to read classics. I feel like I don't know these references that people make, or I feel like I should read the class. I don't know why I went through this phase. I did. All reading is valid. Read what you want.
I don't know why you weren't an English major. Between the two of us, I'm the English major, and Emily was the history major.
I tried. Yeah. I wanted to double in English, and they told me I was not allowed to double in English and history because there were too many majors. Yeah, and education. I would have been a triple major, and that would have just been a lot.
Yeah. That explains so much.
I was torn. I was very torn. History won out. But I do remember reading them, and the racial slurs I remember sticking out to me. Now, my, again, social studies history teacher cap here. Right. The way I read them, though, well, yes, those slurs were there. Maybe I could see why you don't want this book. Maybe 6th grade, I would have been maybe a little cautious about with that kind of language. I would have been curious to see how your teacher framed that, or if you didn't read the whole book, but you read excerpts, maybe you jumped around.
That was Tom Sawyer, and I don't think it's as prevalent. Huckleberry Finn was 11th grade, and I feel like there is a distinction there between the two.
For sure.
Because I wouldn't be in favor of banning it or challenging it maybe at a high school level, because if we are talking about race, you can't exclude that language because it was very real and very impactful in the time that it was used, and it still is. And I wouldn't want to avoid that conversation because that language is being used purposefully, and how that affects, and it does affect the character. So I'm not saying it's right to use that language and everything saying, but within the story and the structure that it's in, and if we're doing, you could also study Tom Sawyer. While it's fiction, I think as removed as we are, you could even say it's historic fiction at this point, because you could look at setting and look at characters and see how history is playing out there in the Reconstruction era when it's published, what that language means. So I saw the language, again, I was reading this in college as a history major studying American history, that I was able to read it as this is part of the American story. It's a hard part of the story, but we should talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you watch the films, though, I don't think you would see half of that show up. Like they focus on the parts I think Walt Disney loved, which was all the adventure and the boy, like the story of the Midwest and adventure and big dreamers.
Yes. And that's, I wondered too, with Courtney, but I think you kind of answered it with, as far as when you read it, was it a like abridged, edited version? Because I know some schools will have a like kind of a classroom set, and you'll open it up and you'll see that words have been changed, so that adventure story's still there, but that language has been taken out, because it's kind of one of those when teachers want to teach the adventure but not necessarily have the controversy.
No, I think it had the words in
Gotcha.
it. Yeah. Well, I remember this is actually probably the first time I listened to an audiobook was for The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn in particular, because that one is written so prominently in a certain dialect, and the way that I'm a speed reader, and so I was not processing the words very well in the way that I read quickly. So I literally read along with the audiobook in my ear, because I don't even know if it might have been like a free podcast where they read it because it was in the public domain kind of thing. And I was like, this is great. Like, just for reading comprehension on my end. So I do feel like it was not abridged from those recollections.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that's my first experience with it was from this, like, we would get these great illustrated classics, they were called. You'd get them at the grocery store, and they were heavily abridged, kind of kids versions of the classics. So that my first experience with Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer were very, as far as reading them, were very sanitized, and kind of boiled down just to those adventure stories. So then by the time I got to read the other ones later, it was kind of a revelation that, wow, this was missing quite a bit. And it was controversial, and it was definitely, like you said, Emily, kind of reading it like a primary source, as kind of a piece from the time that it came from. So with regards to Disney, am I safe in saying, because I know you're big parks fans, both of you, is your number one Disney connection to these books Tom Sawyer Island?
Yeah, I would think so.
That's I love Tom Sawyer Island, and I could just hang out there all day. It's like different. It's like to be on the island. It's like the island life, right? You get to slow down, and it's just a different pace from the rest of the park.
I love the caves.
Yeah.
I have a secondhand story, but I had friends. I'm an only child, and my mom's a teacher. And sometimes we would travel at the same time as another teacher from her school who had kids around my age. And we met up later for dinner. And the brother was telling me he and his sister, they got in an argument on Tom Sawyer Island, and a storm was coming, and she left, but he couldn't leave because then the little rafts, like, Florida storm, springs up. He could not leave. So he was trapped on Tom Sawyer Island for like an hour. So he went and hid in the caves and like started scaring people.
That's kind of a very Tom Sawyer story, though, isn't it?
I was like, he embodied the spirit of Tom, or Huckleberry Finn. I'm just shook by this 1993 Elijah Wood. I'm looking it up, and it was theatrical too. I was thinking, it's like one of those like ABC
TV movies.
How did I miss this?
I will say personally, I prefer the Elijah Wood one to the Jonathan Taylor Thomas.
Though
Tom and Huck.
JTT plays fast and loose with the text.
He does like a Batman whisper voice through the whole. I rewatched it not too long ago, and he like whispers so many of his lines, and I was like, I don't know that's what my Tom Sawyer felt like when I think of the story. But he was trying to be in all the Tiger Beat magazines and all that stuff at the time, so that was the goal.
And there's also Becky. You get the love interest.
Yes.
And it's so precious too, because like I do think of Tom and Becky when I think of like what does like preteen love look like sometimes. Like they're so like it's so funny. And as a teacher in a high school, like I know it's high school, but like watching freshmen try to flirt with each other is hysterical. I predominantly teach freshmen. So they're still in that, like, I'm emerging from middle school.
Right.
And it's so funny. And that's what it reminds me of, like how he's like trying to be all suave and she's like, no. Like that's just not it. And it takes multiple tries and like building that friendship first. So I always liked that part. I mean, that's what you watch JTT for. Like that's why we were all watching it, was because we're like, I want to meet Becky. But that's what I think of, like thinking back on those funny scenes of him like trying to connect with her, and she's just like, no, like lets him drop through the ceiling and just walks away when he's in trouble.
With this being in like the late 1800s when these books were coming out, they definitely were like that, like pre-YA as a genre type thing, where like that wasn't necessarily as like it wasn't the booming genre that it is now that sells millions of books each year. It was it wasn't even a thing yet. So these stories maybe were kind of a guiding force for some later books, maybe even some that we'll talk about later, that have some adventure and relationships in them and things like that.
Do you think it was like, are you surprised that Disney adapted these into films? Like based on the source material, like what about it seems like Disney?
So I think it goes into that adventure from like what Walt would expect. Like how Walt, like it kind of shocked me that Walt Disney himself was not the one to make these movies.
That's how I was thinking too. I feel like Walt has often, I don't know the exact quote, but said like, the boyhood dreams of like floating down the Mississippi. And certainly I guess, the Walt thing that he touched is putting it predominantly in Disneyland. And then we had it added to Walt Disney World and Tokyo Disneyland as well, I believe. But yeah, that he didn't adapt it, even just for something like the Disneyland TV series. Like, we did Davy Crockett.
Alice in Wonderland like 4 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I'm surprised, Spin and Marty. What are those little Zorro? Like, give it a few. That now in retrospect, that feels shocking to me too. But I agree with you, Eric.
Yeah. You figure too, it would have been a bigger deal too. Like if he would have done it, he would have put it would have been one of those things that stuck with us.
Right. He did have a child portraying Tom Sawyer. We read his book, Tom Nabby, like from Tom Sawyer to Disney legend. But I think it's basically because Tom Nabby just kept asking, can I be Tom Sawyer? And then it went on to have a 40 plus career year with Disney, because he started at age 12 and went on till his early 60s. So it's 50 years.
I just read Dick Nunes's autobiography that just came out in the fall, and he talks about hiring Tom Nabby from his side, and he's like, this kid just ran up to me and was like, Walt says you need to give me a job, and it was just like a whirlwind kind of thing for like how he was in it. So like, no, that, and I know you guys had done that book, and definitely there was a live Tom Sawyer in the parks, yet we never got that movie until the 90s. Well, and both of those.
I wonder if this is one that'll be a reboot someday, like down the path we're going right now with movies. Is Tom and Huck. It's been 30 years. Right. It could be the next.
Yeah, and then they'll have to get Jonathan Taylor Thomas to play like kind of a bit role somewhere.
Like they did Wednesday, and Christina Ricci has a cameo in it.
Yeah. Right.
I love it. I'm in favor of that.
Awesome. Well, let's hope that happens, right? All right. So the next one I want to talk about, there's kind of a big jump before we get another Disney movie that's based off a banned book, and we get in 1961 James and the Giant Peach comes out by Roald Dahl, one of my favorite children's authors. I'll throw that out there right now. Feel free though to disagree with me. Always feel free to disagree. And so this one's been banned a few different times for a few different reasons. One of them, and this one kind of comes up, I feel like this one comes up a lot with banned books, is it encourages children to disobey authority. There were tobacco references and a bad word. Should I say what the bad word is? It's ass. That's the one that got it banned in the one instance. So, and then Disney goes and makes the kind of live action stop motion hybrid with Tim Burton in 1996. So what's your, I want to know, what's your kind of experience with James and the Giant Peach? Is it movie first, book first?
I saw this in cinemas, and so I was very young. I was 4 years old. Now I'm just going to out myself on the age here. It came out in 96 and I was 4. But I remember my dad taking me to see this one. I remember the creepy like rhinoceros or elephants or in the sky. Like that part scared me on the beach when they're charging at the family. But I liked this one. And then I believe I read the book of my own personal choosing in elementary school. It wasn't one that was assigned. I'm a big, but if we're going to talk about Roald Dahl, I'm a big Matilda fan. The Mara Wilson movie. So I think I went through like a Roald Dahl phase. And my mom loves Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So like we're just hitting all the good ones here.
Right.
The Witches was my favorite from Roald Dahl. I
The
really
Witches.
liked that one.
Nice.
I should do that for October.
Shout out to Mrs. Robinson Mrs. Dean, my 6th grade English teacher who read that to us. We read that as a class. But yeah, my experience, I did see the film first before I read James and the Giant Peach, but it was so long ago, I cannot tell you the last time I watched either the film or read the book. But I remember what I loved about it was the pathway to get to New York City. And when the peach ends on top of, was it the Chrysler Building or the Empire State Building? I thought it was
Empire State Building, I believe.
I think so.
It's Annie who wants the Chrysler Building.
Yes.
Like that was just the coolest thing to me, was seeing the peach sitting on top of the Empire State Building and their quest to get to New York. Because I always loved going to New York City, and when you're a kid, like that's like a big thing. And I was from the Philadelphia area, so New York wasn't terribly far. Like we did quite a few day trips, so those were kind of reminiscent for me. That I'm like, I've been there, I know what that is. So I always liked it for that aspect, and I love stop motion. It's so cool. And it was also the trailer. One of the VHSs I always watched had James and the Giant Peach's trailer in it. Like I can recite the trailer to you for sure.
Nice.
I'm not going to, but like I vividly remember watching the trailer a lot because it was at the beginning of a VHS, but I have only seen the movie maybe 2 or 3 times.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, maybe we'll have to have you recite the trailer as a bonus. No.
She's ready.
No, I think I had a similar experience, and I'm wondering if it's, I'll say I'm not that much older than you all, but I am. I got to figure it out. I was probably, I was 11 when this one came out. So I saw it on VHS, I'm sure, the first time, probably at a friend's house. And I remember it kind of popping up through the years, but like I didn't read this one until well after I had seen the movie, say, a number of times. I read it when I was in school to become an elementary school teacher in my undergrad. And it was kind of on the list of things that we needed to read for a children's lit class, amongst a bunch of other things. And I enjoyed it then, but it was weird because I was coming to it as an adult, looking at it as something that I might want to teach at some point. So it was kind of a different experience with it in that way. But I think I want to say that having that movie come out, I think it did kind of reopen the book to a new generation. I'm not too sure before that how many kids were out there reading James and the Giant Peach regularly.
I feel like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was probably the most popular of his.
Oh, yeah.
Matilda was around the same time for the film, right?
And Matilda's recently also been redone.
As a musical.
Right, in the musical, yeah.
That's exciting.
I haven't watched that.
Witches got made twice. Anne Hathaway was in the reboot. But he does have staying power. I was rereading through like the plot of the story real quick. And I find it interesting that it was banned for disobeying authority. But then when you look at his aunts, they're not good people. They're abusive.
No.
And I'm thinking, like, it sounds almost Cinderella-ish. No one blames Cinderella for trying to get out of her wicked stepmother, but we're banning this because he's disobeying his aunts and he ran away from home? Like, I'm confused on where the authority piece is coming in here.
A lot of times I think what happens with like children's literature is that it'll get banned by the parents who see the event out of context, or they see the word out of context, or the whatever happened that they're upset about. They don't have the whole picture of it, and a lot of times they maybe don't go the extra mile to kind of get the context. So that happens a lot with challenged books, because if you're bringing a book that you don't have the whole picture for, it's going to be hard to change that challenge to a banning in a library. It's going to be harder, I should say. But I think that that's what does happen sometimes. And so that disobeying authority, like on the surface, yes, in that scene, in those scenes in that book, in the movie, he's totally disobeying his authority figures. But it's kind of to survive, to save himself.
I wonder if parents were afraid kids would be like, oh, my parents are forcing me to do chores. Never again. Or like that the kids will take it out of context. Like that is so interesting though, because again, looking at these reasons that those categories unsuitable for an age, I guess this would play into, because you want to encourage kids to not smoke, because there's tobacco references. The Disney disclaimer now in front of like half of the films from before the 60s.
I wonder if it's in the movie, if there's tobacco in the 96.
Yeah, I don't know.
But it does, I guess, fall into like you want to encourage kids to listen to your authority figures, your parents, your teachers. I just found that interesting, like just rereading the plot real quick to refresh. And I was like, oh, but we're not, I don't know. I see disobeying authority, like I think about like 1984, where like you're going to overthrow a government or something. And I'm like, but they're abusive parents or caregivers. They're not good people. Interesting.
For sure.
I'm glad the movie got made though. Stop motion is so cool. And I hope we get more stop motion in the future, because we're getting that Mickey Mouse, or we have the Mickey Mouse stop motion. I still have to watch it.
It's cute. It's on Disney Plus.
It was pretty cool. So we had James and the Giant Peach was a 1961 book release. Just the next year, we have the next book that got released, and it actually won the Newbery Award the year that it came out in 1962, and that's Madeleine L'Engle's A Wrinkle in Time. Now, we actually kind of almost got started talking about this one before we started recording, so let's get into it. So before we do, let's say the Wrinkle in Time has had so one of the reasons it's been banned and challenged a lot, and I found this kind of interesting. It's kind of like what we got with Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer, where we have kind of contradictory reasons why it's happening. But we have that some groups have said that the book is too religious or Christian specifically, and some have complained that it undermines Christianity or religion. So we kind of have different groups disliking it for almost the complete opposite reasons. And of course, we have two Disney connections here. We have a ABC TV movie from 2003, and then of course the Oprah produced Disney theatrical release from 2018. So we got books, we got two different movies. Where do you guys fall on
this is where the hot takes are going to come in.
Yes, hot takes.
Am I going first or you, Courtney?
You can go first.
Okay, so I never read this as a kid. I actually read it because the film was being made. I decided that I should see, because the cast looked amazing. I was like, but I should read the book first. And I am someone who does go back and read children's literature. You can't see it on my camera, but the shelf directly off screen to me is all my childhood favorites. And I go back and I reread them, probably one or two every year, that I really loved. And I was like, I've never been disappointed by a Newbery winner, and I did not like this book. And not for any bad reasons where like I thought the writing's bad. I just really, maybe because I read it as an adult, my imagination is just not where it is or something. But I had so much trouble following what was happening. It was almost too abstract for me that I couldn't follow. And I'm all for the magic of the abstract, but I just could not follow what the scientist was trying to accomplish, and why the going back and forth between worlds and what they were trying to do. In the end, it's all about love, which is wonderful. A lot of themes are like that, and I appreciate that. And I think that the journey that Meg goes through is a good coming of age story, but I like kept putting it down. It didn't hook me. I did read the whole thing. I did finish it. But I was just like not as enthused by it. And then I ended up not seeing the film because I was just like not excited about it. I didn't watch it.
You did see the film?
I didn't watch it. Maybe that will help me understand what
no, it won't.
It off.
That's the sad part. It won't.
No, it won't.
And I like felt awful because I'm like, this is a Newbery winner, and people rave about how it's a book that transformed their childhood. And I was like, I don't see it. And maybe because I missed out reading it in my childhood, but my hot take, Wrinkle in Time is not as good as I think people give it credit for.
Whoa.
I'm coming in with the hotter take that I did read it in my childhood and I didn't like it. I think it's, we were talking before the recording for your listeners that, Eric, you're like, oh, you guys didn't do this on the podcast. And we realized timeline, the film came out in, I believe, March of 2018, and we didn't start our podcast till June, but it's probably for the best because I feel like we would have been canceled from the get-go because I understand this is such a beloved one, but this was assigned reading for me in 5th grade, and I know I read it. Like, I was always really good about like actually reading the books. I wasn't a Cliff Notes person, but I didn't like it, and I felt like, I don't know, I think I just didn't like the character of Meg. Which is weird because I feel like as a 10-year-old, like a 13-year-old girl would be like aspirational for you, but I don't know, she annoyed me. And then I did reread it in 2018. I was like, you know what? Like maybe I just wasn't in the right headspace at 10 years old. I'm gonna reread it before the movie, and I still did not enjoy it. But I did go see the movie. But then the movie was disappointing, which was a bummer because, as you said, Emily, like I feel like there's a lot of, I wanted it to do well. Like I wanted the director Ava to succeed. Strong cast, and it has a good story. Like reading again the Cliff Notes or the Spark Notes version of this, like it's all about, you have these 3 friends who have different, I guess, gifts. One's intelligent, one's strong. She has the ability to be compassionate and loving, and when they're faced with challenges, they all try to use their strength, and she's the one that can prevail. So like I get the bigger picture. And that, you know, they're on an adventure and there's rules. You have to stay together or these things will happen. But I was just so confused about how, and I'm all for travel in space and time. Like, I don't know why this just did not click with me. Because I like science fiction. I read a lot of fantasy. And I was just like, I don't know why this is not clicking, but it did not. What about Eric, for you? I was going to say, Eric, can you redeem it for the listeners?
I will say this. I was kind of shocked because this one is one of my favorites. Tell us
why, please.
And you guys,
sell it.
I'll tell my experience with it. In that I am, I'll tell you, I did not read a lot of books as a kid. I have a kind of an eye that skips around the page, so I am not a speed reader. I'm a slow reader. Go figure. This guy is the guy who became a librarian, but. A lot of my reading of children's literature came later because I enjoyed reading it when I was going to school to become a teacher. And I found that my eye didn't skip as much because the print was a lot bigger. And I was like, yes, this is my genre. I'm going to read kids' books as an adult, and that's going to be my thing. And then I was an ELA teacher for middle school. Now I'm a librarian. It worked out for me. But I read this one in college, and I didn't realize I had read it in elementary school. And I won't say I read it, but it was read to us in class. And I realized when I was reading it in undergrad the first time, the second time, I realized that I did, like, it kind of came to me like, wait a minute, this sounds a little familiar. But when I was hearing it in elementary school, it was totally over my head. It was totally nothing I could kind of. It's convoluted. It's very, it is very deep. I shouldn't say convoluted. That's got a negative term, and I'm trying to sell you guys on this. But it's got like a very complicated, like rules of the universe that they use, and kind of the Tesseract and the kind of wrinkling time and space to travel to different worlds and through different times. I do love that they kind of pick a time travel method and they stick to it. And that always bothers me if a book, movie, etc. does time travel and then contradicts themselves and makes something weird, and it takes me out of it. But I've gone back and read it a few other times, and I do find that as I read it in different stages of my life, I am able to get different things out of it.
I like
so that's one thing. Yeah, I do appreciate that about it. Now, I have a sixth grader, a daughter at home, and I'm like this. I have constantly put it on her shelf. She's constantly like, what should I read next? She always asks me this, but whatever I give her, she's not going to read because I picked it. But I keep putting A Wrinkle in Time on her shelf. So now that the two of you told me about your experiences reading it when you were younger and me remembering that it was very complicated, I'm very interested now to see what she's going to get out of it if she ever decides to crack it open. The movie, though, I'll totally agree with you, is it was disappointing. And I think part of it is one of the reasons I loved it, in that it's grown-ups making the movie for what they think kids want to hear and see. And it got a lot of into explaining like the physics behind things and getting into like what the work he was doing, where the book doesn't get as much into that, and kind of leaves that be. And I think the grown-ups, when they try to make it, they try to make sense out of it. And it doesn't necessarily need to be that way for it to be a good story. So I do think it kind of does take you out of it a little bit.
You also mentioned the 2003 made for TV. Have you seen that one?
So I did see it a long time ago when I was enjoying the book, and I went and like seek this out. I'm like, is there a movie of this? Because it would be a cool movie. Like, that's where my brain goes with it. Like, how would they do that? And it's very, very disappointing. It's not, it's totally made for TV. It's got that kind of, it's got that cheap kind of CG quality to it of the early 2000s. Yeah. And so Madeleine L'Engle, actually, there's a quote when they asked her about this film that I just pulled up here. I want to say, she said, "I have glimpsed it and I expected it to be bad, and it is." So even her like assessment of that 2003 one was that she expected it to not be so good, and it was pretty bad.
I remember seeing it advertised, like, coming to the wonderful world of Disney, but this would have been right after I read it, and I was like, no, I didn't like that.
No thanks.
I'll pass. I'll watch the Matthew Broderick Music Man, but I'm gonna skip out on this one.
Nice. So yeah, it's the only, as I'm looking at it, it's the only award winner in that sense that got an ALA medal. And it's interesting that that's where our hot takes came from.
I don't think Emily and I expected it. We realized we had never talked about it because it came out before we had the idea for the podcast. So
I'm
we're
not
consistent,
against
at least in our taste.
I will give it another go someday.
Give it another go, because there are we're still going. We got still some on the list. I got a hot take coming up later. But we'll see how that goes. But I'd say give it another try at some point. If you've only ever read it once, which you said you've read it twice, and you go into it knowing how you felt about it the first time, I think that does kind of change how you approach a book.
I went in with an open mind, though, because I did not like the Phantom Toll Booth as a kid, and then I reread it as an adult, and I loved it. So I was optimistic. I feel like they're kind of similar in a way.
Yes.
And I was like...
See, I love the Phantom Toll Booth, too.
I love it now. And so I was like, yeah, well, I changed my mind on that. Like, I've grown. Yeah. No, not for A Wrinkle in Time. Phantom Toll Booth, though, we need an adaptation of that.
I wonder if I do the Courtney method and get the audiobook of Wrinkle in Time and read along with it. Like, maybe that'll also help keep me from getting back into my head of
engaged.
Yeah, and keep me engaged with it. Maybe I'll pick something up with the way the reader reads it, the cadence that they have or whatnot. That'll help. So there are two different audiobook versions. I have listened to I do a lot of listening to my books also. And there is one came out, I want to say maybe a little closer to when the movie was coming out with, I can't remember who the narrator was, but before that, Madeleine L'Engle, the author, had done the audiobook.
Nice.
So it was really cool to see like where she wanted to put emphasis on things and how she played the characters. And she's got a very distinct voice. So it was kind of an interesting one. So if you can find the one where she's reading it, I'd recommend
That's
that
intriguing because I feel I've really enjoyed audiobooks when they've been memoirs. So we recently covered Haley Mills and Julie Andrews, and I was like, gonna have the audiobook of that because it's read by the author, but it's them talking about their life. I don't think I've encountered an audiobook as you've described where it's a work of fiction but read by the author. So that is very intriguing to me.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty interesting. All right. So our next book is our next entry here from 10 years after A Wrinkle in Time. We get a book that's probably not as famous as the movies plural,
I agree.
that have come from it. And that's Freaky Friday by Mary Rogers. And this one was not banned. It has just been challenged. It was specifically challenged in Tampa Bay in 2001, which is kind of weird because it had been sitting on that library shelf for years.
Almost 30 years.
Before it was even checked out once. So that was it hadn't been checked out in the article I was reading. It hadn't been checked out until this time that it was checked out, and it was challenged because of violence and swearing.
Interesting.
Well, thinking about the time frame, you said 2001 is what it was challenged. The remake in 2003, that's the Lindsay Lohan version, which maybe that's where the kid got it from. They loved the movie. And they're like, oh, I should go read the book. And then who knows?
Well, if it was 2001, it would have been.
Yeah.
Oh, well, maybe right before. Sorry.
They might have heard that. They read in Tiger Beat that it was coming. So they wanted
there you go.
to do their homework.
Exactly. Sorry. I was thinking backwards that maybe.
Right.
I was thinking published 20.
You were in A Wrinkle in Time, Emily.
I was in A Wrinkle in Time. There it is.
Just Tesseract.
But yeah, it is interesting how books sometimes come into fad, or maybe the family loved the ABC TV movie or the original. Like I always knew the 70s version existed, but I've only watched really the 2003 version.
Oh,
Gotcha. See, my first experience with the 70s version was in the 90s. So this is like probably about 20 years after that one came out. We watched it as like kind of an incentive movie in school. Okay. And I remember kind of thinking like, this movie's pretty old. Like when I was watching it it felt very 70s as a 90s kid sitting there watching it. But that was my first kind of connection to it. But yeah, the 2003 one. Yes.
So good.
Actually, though, my first experience was the 1995 one. I'm probably in the minority here.
Well, I will say when I was looking for different versions, I missed that one on my first pass.
Okay.
And I didn't even realize that was a thing.
It's good. I like it. It's Shelley Long. I don't know that the actress who played the daughter went into anything, but I don't know. I love Troop Beverly Hills, so like I'm just here for campy Shelley Long late 80s, early 90s films. I don't even think I watched it live on TV. I think it just ended up getting replayed on the Disney Channel, as some like non-Disney Channel movies tended to do in the mid 90s. So that is where I discovered Freaky Friday. But the one that I associate most is the Lindsay Lohan, Jamie Lee Curtis. So good.
We were the demographic for that though. 2003, we were in middle school.
Yes.
Coming out of fifth grade, going into middle school.
That soundtrack still slaps.
Now, did Lindsay Lohan she had songs all over that soundtrack, didn't she? Because she was the musician in the movie.
Yes.
So that would have made sense. Because that was, I would always associate that one with Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, because I feel like those two movies came out right around the same time with her.
Great.
Yes, that was the second coming of Lindsay Lohan, because she had success with The Parent Trap, but then I guess went off to be a kid, and then Disney went all in on Freaky Friday and Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, and then she
Haley Mills story,
reached
almost
the stratosphere on her own with Mean Girls and everything else from there on.
So did any of us read the book?
I did.
Read Freaky Friday? Okay. I have it. I'm only familiar with the story through
I haven't read it either.
I definitely read it probably shortly after the 2003 movie. Like I was like, oh, I'll go. It inspired me to check it out.
Nice.
And I don't think I watched the 77 one till maybe a few years ago. Like it just wasn't super accessible. I might have watched it on Disney Plus, or borrowed it from a friend at work. That's a different story. The book, though, it's definitely, it's a kid's book of its time. Like I was probably reading it at 15 or 16, and it was definitely more aimed at like a 12 or 13-year-old audience. I do think they aged her up in the films. I could be completely wrong about this, but I feel like she's maybe 13 or 14 in the book, and in both the Shelley Long and the Lindsay Lohan, she's like 15 or 16. So there are some very different plot points. I feel most true to the book would be the 77 one, like Jodie Foster's right around the correct age. She's very much a tomboy. That's a big part of it. I think in both of the 90s and the 2003, the mom is like a working mom, whereas it is very in the 70s, like she is a homemaker. She stays at home. And so part of the hijinks that ensue are like, you know, this 12-year-old doesn't know how to cook or make breakfast for the little brother. So very much a time capsule of the 70s, but fun to see how it has been adapted to other time periods, including the 2018 DCOM. Did either of you see that on Disney Channel?
I haven't.
I did. I saw it. My kids were kind of way into the all of the like Descendants things at the time, and I remember we were watching. I think it was one of those, or Zombies, or one of those that they kind of promoted this one for, and I was like, they're doing Freaky Friday again. Like Disney keeps on, you know, doing versions of this, and then we watched it one summer, and that's when I realized it was the musical, which was adapted from, there was a 2016 musical. So the DCOM one, was the musical version, which kind of puts a whole different spin on it.
Yeah, I watched it. I have been out of the DCOM game for many years now, but somehow caught wind of it. Love the other Freaky Friday adaptations, and I actually really like the actress Heidi Blickenstaff, who plays the mom. This is like a really deep, obscure theater nerd cut, but she was in this show called Title of Show, and it's very funny. Highly recommend looking it up. I don't know. I was like 15 and got really into that show, and
that doesn't surprise me about you, Courtney.
She went on to play Ursula in The Little Mermaid on Broadway, replacing the actress who had originated the role. So I was aware of Heidi Blickenstaff. I was like, all right, cool. She's doing a movie. It's Freaky Friday. So I did tune into Disney Channel to watch the premiere of that. And it was cute. I thought they did a good job with it. Though sometimes she'll come to Epcot for the Festival of the Arts. So sometimes they'll throw out a song in from there. But I feel like a lot of the people in the audience are like, what is this?
They don't even know what it's coming from. Well, and that was like when I watched it, I remember being kind of like I'm the person who can't watch something without like looking everything up. I don't know how you guys fall on that, but I don't think I've fully watched anything in years, because I'm like, who is that? I know that guy from something. She was in something, like whatever, you know. So I'm always looking things up. But like I was like, did they write all these songs for this, you know, Disney Channel movie? Like what? And I look, and it's like, no, there was a Disney produced musical from 2016 that they just adapted for TV.
It's one of those where it didn't really go on to Broadway. It did like a trial run out of town, but I think the sole purpose of it was so that they could sell it to schools or like theater camps for licensing purposes, which, you know, good for them.
Oh, of course. Yeah, no, that you know, something good came of it, right? We got that Disney Channel original movie version.
Courtney, since you read the book, the reasons it was challenged, which I read the article that you shared with us, and it seemed like everyone looked at this parrot like they were crazy. They were like, it was a 4-1 vote, like to not take it off the shelves. And they made arguments about censorship, but the reasons that you have cited were for violence and swearing. And maybe I could see where some swearing comes in, like we said, the bad word in James and Giant Peach. But where is violence? Because I do not remember violence like in the Lindsay Lohan version, but I know people change it as we've adapted it. But where in the book was there violence that possibly could have been what was questioned?
I mean, it's been like 15 years since I've read it. But do you know, Eric? Because I was going to guess, is it targeted at the little brother? Like,
it was a scene, and it's one of those. I'm pretty sure it was a throwaway scene taken out of context. And so, which is interesting because it's not anything to do with the 77 movie. Like there's no this didn't even make the cut. It was so throwaway. There's like a scene where they do like the finger play version of like, here's the church and here's the steeple, open the doors. And they say, instead of see all the people, they say, kill all the people. And that's where that comes from. So it's like a one little line.
I couldn't think of anything.
Yeah, because that probably didn't hang with you. It didn't scandalize
when
you.
I saw it was on this list before seeing the reasons, I was thinking back, like maybe there was something about like womanhood and like puberty. Like I could see that being addressed right around the time period of this book, and I don't remember if it was or not. So then, yeah, I was surprised to see the language and the quote air quote violence. I think the language is probably like damn or something.
Right.
Very
Which
like
again is
that.
funny. You said it was challenged it was challenged in 2001, not in the 70s. So like that gap, like what we consider now bad language, they like our bar is a lot higher now for bad language. Like those words would only hit would be PG-13 now, not maybe what in the 70s they would have been like, oh, scandalous. Or something for children anyway. Like even for children's stuff now, like damn would be PG if there's only one in there or something like that. So I was just so curious because I did not expect Freaky Friday to be on here because it's such a family idea of like kids misunderstanding their parents and parents misunderstanding their kids. It's such a family oriented idea that I was really shocked that this one was considered a banned or a challenged book, not banned.
Challenged, right? And it's for some of the other heavy hitters, like to put this on a list with like Huckleberry Finn, and A Wrinkle in Time is another one that's been challenged a lot. To put it on a list with those is probably like I'm probably pushing it a little bit because it was only challenged once. But I think it did, and it's a good illustration of sometimes how those little throwaway scenes can get taken out of context. Because I'm sure it was some character building that happened with that scene to kind of let us know something about how the character felt at the time. But it shows us how that challenge doesn't always go through to a banning when it's kind of taken out of context like that. So it's a good illustration of that in the process. So our next one, we're staying in the 70s. In 1977. We get The Bridge to Terabithia by Catherine Patterson. And this one is another one that's very frequently banned. And we got references to witchcraft, atheism, and swearing. Swearing comes up a lot. Just those little, one or two words. But witchcraft, atheism, and swearing, which is interesting. And similar to Madeleine L'Engle with religion coming up, both of the authors, Catherine Patterson and Madeleine L'Engle, are Christian and have like ministers or preachers within their in their families. So they both have taken kind of like what do you mean this is like an anti-religious kind of book, or at least saying that it's the atheist, or they kind of were taken aback, and Catherine Patterson for sure was taken aback when she heard her book got banned.
Yeah, so I actually have the article up that you shared with us. This is from Carnegie Mellon University's Banned Books Project, talking about different books. One, they cite that Bridge to Terabithia has stayed in the top 10 banned challenge books since its publication. And then, quote, like most children's book authors whose books have been challenged, Patterson finds it ironic that her book has been banned, seeing as her own parents are Christian missionaries and she got married to a Presbyterian minister. She found it hard to believe that her book incited the idea of promoting secular humanism, New Age religion, witchcraft, evil, and the danger to children. As time moves on, Patterson's novel goes lower and lower on the banned book list, but its challengers prevail in hopes to avoid corrupting their children and to shelter them from the inevitability of death and grief, end quote. So interesting.
Yeah. That you could totally tell that what it's being banned for over and over, because as you pointed out from the article, it's been on that top 10 list, and that's happening less and less with Bridge to Terabithia as time goes on. It's kind of not making those top spots anymore, but it's totally opposite of what her intention was.
So I remember reading this book. It might have been earlier than middle school, but maybe I'm having a flashbulb memory, maybe something. I think this is the first book that made me cry. I think this was the first book that made me cry because it is so powerful. Spoiler alert.
It is.
It's two best friends. It does tackle issues around mostly about class and socioeconomics. Like she has a little bit more money. Like he goes to her house and he's like, you have a television, you have a new radio. She got new paints, and like it blows his mind the difference between the way they live. But you know, they make their make-believe world together and build a tree house, but then she dies because she goes and runs to the tree house when she's like mad about a fight or whatever, and she's trying to climb the tree house and it's storming and she falls out of the tree and she dies. And it's so tragic because he blames himself. And where it comes from, I guess the questioning of religion is the stages of grief you go through of like, you believe in God, maybe, or you have religious beliefs in some form of afterlife, but then you're like, how is this fair? And going through all of that. So maybe that's what they're challenging, or they don't want 10-year-olds thinking about grief and death, even though it's a very real reality for many kids. But I remember that scene making me cry, and that might have been the first book that made me cry. I think I was probably towards somewhere between 5th and 7th grade, I think, when I tackled this one. I can't quite remember when I did, but I do remember reading it for school. This one was assigned to me.
Yeah, this one gets assigned a lot. It does have that. It's very much. I feel like it's one of those cornerstone kind of gateway to YA literature books, because it is that younger age, but it deals with a lot of those themes that come up in a lot of great YA titles that students will read later. So it's like that's. If this book resonates with a reader when they're younger, you kind of know what they're going to really like when they get up into middle school and high school. So like as a librarian, it's one of those that I can look at like, you really liked Bridge to Terabithia? All right, we know where we're going with this.
I want to test your
or
knowledge.
If you didn't like it so much.
I want to test.
Yeah.
If I loved this book, what then would be other books you think I would have gravitated towards as a reader?
One that I always make the connection to in my mind with this one, I go straight John Green.
Okay.
And I think of like Looking for Alaska.
So I haven't read many John Green, but I have read Fault in Their Stars.
Fault in Our Stars.
I have read one. I have more of his stuff on my to-be-read list. But yes, I did enjoy Fault in Their Stars.
Okay.
I was going to say, that seems like Emily books. I can say from Emily's personality, like, that feels accurate. Even if she hasn't
John
read
Green?
them, yeah.
Okay. So I would say... So now here's your homework. No, I'm not going to give you homework. But if you do read, right? If you do read Looking for Alaska, let me know what you think. And if it kind of had that I could kind of draw a line between the two, where you kind of can with some of the other John, like if you say Fault in Our Stars, sure, we could find some connections here.
I'm just having like this would be a weird epiphany tangent, like, of your childhood librarian. Like, I was like, what was mine? I really liked The Westing Game, and I love mysteries and thrillers now. Like, it all makes sense. The through line is there. You could make like a whole little like flow chart of this. That is completely out of left field, but I just like in the video I saw myself have the epiphany.
That's another one. That's another one that too is one of those kind of in kind of like it's not the YA yet, but it's not.
That's like, what I was trying to think. Like, all right, what was I liking in that wheelhouse?
No, for sure.
Because of Winn-Dixie, that kind of thing.
No, I was just thinking, what were the other books I read around the time? Because of Winn-Dixie, Tuck Everlasting, which I reread like every 2 years. I love Tuck Everlasting.
That explains a lot about you. It
explains so much, probably. Like, I was trying to think of those books that I read. Freak the Mighty was a popular one I loved. But yeah, there's. We should definitely do Tuck Everlasting on our podcast. I'm thinking.
Eric, do you like that one? We're about to invite Eric.
I want to say I don't know if I ever read it
on just banned books and just do.
I've seen them. Right? No. Hey, you've got the list to start. Yeah. If you guys would do like deep dive episodes you do on any of these, I'd be excited.
We would love to have you.
But that would be exciting too. I was just saying, if you guys did them and I got to listen, I would be excited.
We'd love to have you.
If I got to be on it too,
you are
that would be amazing.
Are to be read here. I will get us back to Bridge to Terabithia.
Oh yes, bring us back over that bridge.
You're back on the swing on a rope and fall to my death.
Yes.
I had not engaged with this until 2 days ago, but I Yeah, I was aware of it. I feel like, sometimes you were in like different reading groups in school, and like some kids read like one group, but like my group did not read Bridge to Terabithia, but I knew it existed. And then I remember seeing the trailers for it when it came out. I don't know if either of you got into this. Do you know like the controversy about the way that this movie was marketed?
I think this might be the go forward with it, but this might be my hot take problem with it.
So
yes,
the marketing was very much like leaning into the high fantasy of the imaginative scenes in Terabithia, the CGI effects, like really trying to set itself up to be like, if you liked Chronicles of Narnia, you're gonna love Bridge to Terabithia. And so I didn't see it. I guess I would have been 15 when it came out. Like I remember seeing, like I can picture the trailer in the movie theater being like, I don't know, like I'm starting to age out of this. I'm okay. Did not see it, but then it affected a whole generation because I can remember being on Tumblr in college and there being all these memes. So I watched the movie 2 days ago, but it wasn't a big twist for me when they pulled the rug out from under you and they're like, she died. Because so many people were like, I've got beef with this rope swing, like this movie. So the controversy, to circle back, was that a lot of kids went into it, or like parents took their kids to it thinking like, oh, this is going to be this high fantasy, kids imaginative thing. And it is, as Emily said, a sad story.
Yeah,
that
you end up going through all the stages of grief.
Topics.
Yeah.
So what's your hot take?
So when I had read it before the movie was even a thing, I did not even read into the make-believe that they did.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sure, they had their treehouse on the other side of the river, the stream. Yeah, and I didn't, like, think it was going to be any sort of, like, it didn't warrant any CGI fantasy elements. So when the movie came out, I was like, that's not the Bridge to Terabithia. I don't know what movie this is. Like, seeing the trailers. And then so the first time I actually saw it was when I was a middle school English teacher at the time, and we would do the week before a break or something, they would schedule like an incentive movie day for like a certain portion of the day. They would play a movie through our closed circuit TV, and then they chose The Bridge to Terabithia, and I was like, are you guys sure you want to do this? Like, do you know what's gonna happen? Like, you get, so it's that same kind of controversy that you have. And I'm like, well, this is what we're doing. Me, the seventh grade ELA teacher sitting there at the time, I'm like, it's happening. And the kids weren't really into the movie at the beginning. It's got that kind of quiet,
slow start,
indie pacing at the beginning. Yeah, it's got that slow start. And then like by the time the fantasy things kicked in, some of them were, still not buying it yet. And then like the last part of the movie, the third act here, when she falls off and dies, and everyone was just like, whoa, what are we watching? Like I'm in this room with all these seventh graders, and I was like, this is why I was like, are you sure we want to do this? Are you sure we want to do this right now as a whole school movie? Okay, here we go.
I want to read the book to see how they handle the death, because it just is like a blip in the movie I watched. Like, he goes on this weird, like, I don't know, the whole like teacher taking him to the museum just felt really weird in the movie. The way they framed it, I was like, this is giving me the ick. I don't know. Like, I know it's very innocent, but it was framed weird. Anyway, all that aside, he comes home like, we thought you were dead. And he's like, dead? And they're like, yeah, Leslie's dead. And it's just out of nowhere, like, just, it sounded like, Emily, from what you were describing, there's a little more buildup, there's tension between them. I mean, it comes out that he feels guilty that he didn't, like, you see him think about asking her to go to the museum, but he wants to go with his teacher. But I was like, oh, like, I went into the whole movie knowing that she died, and I thought it was going to be like more traumatic
to be
than it was.
Yeah.
Like, but I didn't need to see her die. I don't want this to be misconstrued. But like, I was like waiting for this like moment that I was like, oh, like, she dead. We just wrote her out of the script now. So what do you remember from the book, Emily or Eric?
And Eric, you can correct me. I remember it's been a few years. I have read it, I think probably 3 times, but it's been a long time since that last read. But like going to the museum, but they had some tension beforehand, and like they have a rift, like friendships do. They fight over something, and so fine, I'm going over, you do whatever. And they split their ways. He does the museum thing. He's like, I'm good. I don't need this. But then, misses his friend. And I thought there was a moment he goes to find her and he goes to the treehouse, but he can't get over there because the rope swing is gone. Or like he goes over to her house or something, is like, hey, is she here? Can we talk? And that like something happens that he's trying to reconnect with his friend. And then like that's where the guilt comes from, of like where he left their friendship on a bad place. And then she passes. Or something like that. That's what I remember.
There is some more guilt that's built, and in the movie, it's one of those things that because they turned the time of the movie up more on the fantasy, play kind of thing, they turned down the main purpose of the story with the grief and the dealing with it, because there's a scene where they do have a rift, and then when he's going to go on his day trip with the teacher, because the skeleton of the story is almost identical in the book and the in the movie. They don't change major events that much. When he's going on his day trip with the teacher to the museum, he like kind of thinks about, and you get kind of the mental gymnastics that he does of like, should I invite her to come with us? Mm-hmm. But they had just kind of had that rift. So then the guilt is shown even stronger, because he kind of feels like if he would have just stopped and said, hey, can we come with us to the museum, then it wouldn't have happened that she would have gone to the treehouse to Terabithia that day. He could have stopped it.
It's really all the teacher's fault for taking him to the
maybe Zooey Deschanel's fault. No.
What are you doing? I also wanted to share a fun fact that I learned, because like you, Eric, if I'm watching a movie at home, I am now on IMDb and Wikipedia at the same time. So 2 facts, but they're interconnected. I learned that Catherine wrote this book after the death of her son's friend. Like, this is inspired by a true story in regards to her son was a bit younger, like 8 at the time, and he had a girl that he was friends with, but unrelated to like a falling out or anything. It was just tragic. She was struck by lightning at the beach and was only 8 years old. But like obviously she then saw her son go through this grieving process, so that's what inspired her to write the book. And then I learned that he is one of the screenplay writers credited on the movie. So I thought that was a cool full circle that she kind of wrote this for her son, and then he was able to then channel those feelings into writing the screenplay for the Disney film. So thank you, Wikipedia and IMDb.
I will say the movie, though, I only watched the film, I think, once or twice. Since it didn't stick out to me, I haven't gone back to it. But it did give us Jess Hutcherson.
I was going to say, it has Peeta from the Hunger Games.
It is launched.
I put it on as
launched his career.
Little baby Peeta.
So that came out of this. That was a good thing,
and
too.
Anna Sophia Robb, who, I don't know, like, is she doing anything? Because I feel like she was all over the place for a second there. Like, she was in the Johnny Depp, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
She was Violet Beauregard, right?
She was doing well for herself. I mean, maybe she's still doing stuff, but good for them.
The Where Are They Now? Yeah.
I can't believe, though, that like when going into the movies, and maybe it's because we're readers or something, like this book's been out since 1977, and people are like, I had no idea this was going to be. There's no spoilers. Like,
it was there the whole time.
I will
everyone,
blame the marketers,
most people could tell you this. Like, and I get not everyone's read the book, so like you're not gonna know. But I have a hard time feeling that like all public sentiment was like shocked by it when I'm like the books existed.
I don't know. There's a whole generation, I think, that was like young enough to be taken to the movie. Like, let's say they were like between the ages of 6 and 9, but maybe had not been given the book at school. Because one of the other things that I like to do when I'm watching a movie, there's a website called Letterboxd where people like rate movies. It's basically like Goodreads for films. And people are really funny in the reviews. So sometimes I'll just read the reviews for snark. And there were so many people who were like, man, this movie messed me up as a kid. And I got the sense that they were at an impressionable age where their parents saw the trailer like, oh, it's like Narnia. Let's go take the kids to see that.
Right.
And then it got really sad.
Yeah, no, I get the kids not knowing. I was just shocked when parents are like, I had no idea what I was taking my kid into. Like,
I guess I didn't think about it. Okay.
But
it was published in the 70s. So, like, if we do the math on, like, a parent's age, like, if they were, you know, too old for the book, but then still young enough to have a kid. I don't know.
I just find it funny. You're right. There are definitely reasons why people wouldn't be aware, but I just find that so...
I kind of wish that I hadn't seen all the memes, and I wonder if I was just like, oh, Eric put this on this list. This is the only one that, like, I don't have an affinity for. It's on Disney Plus. I'll watch it. Like, how I would have reacted. But I went in knowing, like, one of them is going to die. I couldn't remember who, but I was like, a child dies.
Right.
I do want to reread it now.
I do.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, go reread it. Yeah, and as far as the marketing, I feel like everyone was trying, like you said, like Narnia, this is the same Walden Media and Disney kind of, you know, team that made the Narnia movies. And then this was that time when everyone was trying to hit that next Harry Potter. Yes. Like we need, like the Spiderwick Chronicles came out around that time and has
the books. Never saw the show. Love the books.
Yes. In the movie, I love the books too. And as far as the movie goes, I wish I love the book, so we'll just put it that way. But the creatures, I always think of the creatures from the Spiderwick Chronicles movie when I see the Bridge to Terabithia, like imaginary creatures. Yeah. They have a similar CGI feel, and I wonder if it was almost the same people working on both movies. But everyone was trying to fill that fantasy. Fantasy was really big at that time in the mid 2000s.
It would be interesting to see. Again, we're in the age of reboots. Like, would we get some of these redone again? Like, we just had, I guess, Freaky Friday on this list was the most recent. Freaky Friday and Wrinkle in Time were the most recent redone.
Same year.
Yeah, Wrinkle in Time was that the first time it was made into a movie?
It is a TV movie. 2003.
So
yeah.
They're the most recent two on this list to be remade. But I wouldn't be surprised if we get another Bridge to Terabithia down the line, or another James and the Giant Peach. Maybe not because it's stop motion, but maybe something.
I don't think you could beat that stop motion of James and the Giant Peach, though.
Good. Or I think Tom Sawyer would probably be the first, and then maybe Bridge to Terabithia would get a reboot. Out of the list that we've done, I could see those two getting something remade.
That's a good observation.
Yeah. I'd like to see those ones remade. Well, I definitely would like to see Bridge to Terabithia remade because I don't like the one that we got.
I think they need to invite a school librarian to sit on the panel.
Consult on it.
Like, this is the themes you're supposed to get out of this.
Yes. Right. Don't try to make it the next, fantasy movie. All right. So thank you guys so much. I really have enjoyed having this conversation about all these banned books that have been turned into Disney properties in different ways. And I'm excited about, you guys going out there and maybe picking up some of these to read again, reread. I'm going to go back, of course, and reread some of those too, because it was such an inspiring conversation in that sense. And I challenge all the listeners right now to go out and read some of these books, read these banned books that have been made into these Disney movies and these Disney properties. And that'll check two boxes. You'll do something Disney and you'll go out there and read a banned book. So that'll be good stuff. So could you tell us where we can find the Book of the Mouse Club and you guys online?
Yeah, anywhere you are listening to this podcast, you can likely find Book of the Mouse Club podcast. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever Android users find their podcasts, we are there. You can email us with suggestions to bookofthemouseclub@gmail.com. And on social media, we are on Twitter and Instagram at the same handle at Book of the Mouse. We've concluded our 2022 season as we get into the holidays here, but are eager to start our reading in 2023. So Stay tuned to our channel. That's where we often announce what'll be our next read. As I said at the top of the episode, we aim for at least one a month, but you never know. We might fit 2 or 3. We've been known to do that.
So we guarantee you one. Always guaranteed. Like Book
There
of
you
the
go.
Month. Book of the Mouse has one book a month at least.
Of course. That's about my speed too. That's what I try to go for. So that's good. Good timing. I appreciate that. At least once a month. So yeah, for Synergy Loves Company, if you want more Synergy Loves Company, I try to get those episodes out at least once a month. You can find me at synergylovescompany.com, and you could find links to all the different podcast catchers that you might use on there. And then on social media, you could find me on Twitter at Eric H. Synergy, or you could find me on Facebook and Instagram at Synergy Loves Company. Until next time, have a good one. We'll see you later.